Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us. And I think people are probably percolating in from the outside there. So if people are on the threshold, deciding if they're going to come in or not, you're just calling out to you. So thanks for joining us. The genesis of this session was that I'm Trevor Owens. I work at the Institute of Museum and Library Services. And we had a convening earlier this year. I'm in the Office of Library Services, but obviously here I am at a museum event. And so the genesis of this event was that we had IMLS hosted a convening that focused on this priority that is being driven in the library side of our organization on a national digital platform for libraries and museums. And there was a lot of interest in the sort of Twitter stream of having us come and recap some of what we were talking about and see how it connects to museums, since there are a lot of museums engaged in the efforts that we're funding. So as a result of that, we pulled together this group. And so I'm here from IMLS in the library office. Sandra is here from IMLS in the Office of Museum Services. And then Amy and James both have grants from the library side of IMLS that are sort of focused on this national digital platform priority, but are having a huge impact on and serve museums as a sort of core part of what they're doing. So the idea of what we're going to do today is each give a talk a little bit about how some projects that fall under this. I'll give some sort of framework, background, context on it, and then other opportunities that deal with sort of digital things and can relate to and connect to this in the Office of Museum Services. So for starters, we've funded a lot of digital work for a long time at IMLS in a variety of areas and spaces. And on the library side of IMLS, we had something called advancing digital resources as a priority for a long time, or sort of a focal area. And in many cases, those grants would just sort of be whatever the neatest idea is at some point, or something really innovative or out there or creative. And so, there's the Grateful Dead archive, which is pretty neat, and a variety of these of projects, really. And in many cases, those projects were sort of, we'll explore how a model could be developed that might get picked up and used in other places, which is great, and that's good. But at the same time, there was a desire to have, we are a national funder of, and we're really one of the few places that sort of are set up to provide resources to have a national impact. And so the more that we can do that directly, the better. And so we've shifted this around to this national digital platform concept. And I think the core idea here is that there's opportunities to solve local needs and contribute to national efforts at the same time. And so increasingly in the Office of Library Services, we've sort of been revising some of our calls for proposals and things like that, and the review criteria to focus a bit more specifically and directly on making a national impact and trying to get teams to come together to basically catalyze improvements to the digital capability and capacity of our institutions. And that is increasingly our sort of focus in all of this. And we're now using the word, we just had those convenings, which are called Focus from the library side. We have a conference in a couple weeks called Focus in New Orleans. And that's sort of a driving element of this, is to focus more on the places we can have the biggest impact and try and get projects that really connect with and build on each other. And so in that space, you can think about the National Digital Platform as a combination of software, social and technical infrastructure, and staff expertise that provides content and services to all users across the United States. And it's also increasingly there's a global impact that comes from this. It's not like the boundaries of the country end with the web or anything like that. We're really doing this in a broad way. And I'd stress too that it's not just content; it's content and services. So libraries and museums do all kinds of services beyond just sort of access to content. And so with that, it's worth underscoring that this is not an individual thing or a specific piece of software or a website. It's more a way of thinking about what all of that adds up to. So instead of from this perspective, you can think about every library and museum, archive, cultural heritage organization being able to leverage and benefit from the work of other libraries, museums, archives, in shared digital services, systems, and infrastructure. And so in this vein, this is sort of where this is going, and it's very, I'll share some of the projects that we've funded to sort of flesh this concept out in our most recent round of funding. So with this in mind, this isn't a thing that will be built, it's a thing that already exists. There's already foundations of this, and in a lot of ways, there's many of the, I mean, for folks who were in the session that we was just in this room, there's a lot of great software tools and services and work that has been funded by us. I'd add too that it's not just an IMLS thing in the sense that this platform is whatever tools and services people are using, and obviously the, a variety of foundations and the National Endowment for the Humanities, all sorts of organizations have funded this and continue to. So it's more about a frame and a way of thinking about what these projects add up to. So in that vein, what we're trying to do on the library side is increasingly look at improving and connecting promising tools and services that have clear potential to scale up and be more widely used and adopted, and or to fill gaps that exist where there's a clear need for tools and services. And so for some specifics on where this went, the convening that we held that I'd mentioned at MLK Library in DC. There's a report up about it that's a very short document that you can take and look through the kinds of things people were discussing. There's just a PDF on our website. But a lot of the focus was on things like the possibilities that linked open data provide, tools and approaches to things like crowdsourcing as ways to further engage communities, and a variety of things around education and training. I should note on the library side, we have the Laura Bush 21st Century Librarian Program as well as the National Leadership Grants Program, which funds education, training, continuing education, and formal education. And there's a lot of opportunities and needs, because it's not just, the tools and services are only as useful as the sort of expertise of people to run them, create them, and make the best use of them. So I'd encourage everyone to check that out. I'll tweet a link to it later with the hashtag as well. But then I'm just going to share a few projects quick, sort of the back, sort of try and make it a little more concrete in some things that we funded in the first round of this. We've got another series of these that we're going to be funding in the next round. So I'll share these, and then we'll go sort of into some deeper dives on particular projects that I think people here will be excited about and have an opportunity to get involved in. And then Sandra can give some context on a variety of other things that the Office of Museum Services support, which actually do end up fitting in with this idea through a variety of programs they have. So I should also mention, so I'll work through some of these. So one of them is fostering a new national library network through community-based connected repository systems. This is a grant to Dpla, Stanford University at DuraSpace, that is focused on creating a piece of software that's called Hydra in a Box, which I actually think, is that going to come up in your talk? Should I not talk more? I won't talk more about it because it'll come up in Amy's talk. So another example, this is a project, this is the Library E-Content Access Project, or LEAP, which is New York Public Library in collaboration with 19 partner libraries and library consortia from across the country that are working to scale up this Library Simplified open source ebook reader app that they developed to provide sort of a more seamless opportunity for, I don't know if anyone's tried to check out books from your local public library ebooks, but I visited a public library recently, and they had 12 different brochures about how to use, this is how you use Overdrive to get those books, and this is how you use this to get those books. And so it's a real challenge, and it's all sort of, you can't get access to the public domain books. It's a whole complicated challenge. And so they're doing a lot of really great work that's really about sort of coordinating and convening. And I'd add too with these that some of these really big projects are exciting in that there's a whole range of organizations that are benefiting directly from this work. It's not just a single organization that's getting it. So then the museum Hub for Open Content, which we'll hear from James about, is another example. So we've got some of the info about that up there. And then there's a recent grant to the Internet Archive that focuses on systems interoperability and collaborative development for web archives, which again, you can see In this case, Archivit is a service that they've created and is used by more than 300 organizations around the country to do web archiving. And they're working with a bunch of universities who are users of it that want to have better ways to get data in and out of the system and plan for sort of further collaborative open source software development. And then there's a grant that was given to the Biodiversity Heritage Library, which is similarly focused on increasing in particular, the smaller institutions that network can serve and helping them get their content up and out. Another software project, this is a project to create, it's actually a scale-up set of funding for ePad, which is an email appraisal and discovery tool, which is quite neat. So you can check that out on Stanford's website. But they'd gone through several sort of initial rounds of work. It started as a PhD project and is now got an NHPRC grant from the National Archives and is now sort of in its next phase, trying to further spread out who's using it. And then another really neat project is around access to time-based media through crowdsourcing and machine learning, which is with WGBH in partnership with Pop-Up Archive. They have a really massive collection of public media, AV material, and they're working through both machine learning tools and crowdsourcing as ways to work in it. So it's a applied research project, but with the potential to have a really big impact. So that's me running through a few of the projects, and I think we can just hold questions until we get through each of the talks.
Hi, I am Amy Rudersdorf, and I am the Assistant Director for Content at the Digital Public Library of America. And I'm going to talk about how DPLA fosters the concept of the National Digital Platform. Maybe. So the DPLA brings together the riches of America's libraries, museums, archives, and historical societies and makes them available through a web portal at dp.la. And I'm stalling now because my presentation isn't opening. So the DPLA is made up of content hubs and service hubs. These are our direct partners. Service hubs are statewide or regional collaborations made up of lots of different partners, and they aggregate their data and make it available to DPLA through that aggregation. Content hubs are single institutions or large collaborations of like institutions that make their content available to DPLA. So Art Store, for example, is a content hub. Other museum hubs include the J. Paul Getty Trust and the Smithsonian. And then there are museums that are part of these service hubs or regional collaborations, big and small, history, science, and art, all kinds of different museums. And together these hubs and their networks are the contributor communities from which the searchable content in DPLA comes. They're more than data providers. The service hubs actually also provide metadata remediation, professional development, digitization, and other services to ensure that their partners are working to national standards and as part of a national network of practitioners. So there are currently 15 content hubs and 11 service hubs that are part of our network. The 11 service hubs are from states all over the United States. They include some in the Midwest, some in the Mountain West, and many on the East Coast and southeastern United States. So we're going to grow to about 19 service hubs very shortly, and we're looking forward to that growth. Our goal is to complete the map of the United States within the next 2 years. So we'll go from 19 to hopefully 50 states represented in DPLA, and then that means that anyone in those states that has the ability, the desire to become part of this network will be able to do so. There'll be an on-ramp for institutions of all kinds to be part of DPLA. So the DPLA is a portal. It's a web interface. It's a tool for discovery of content. It currently, as I mentioned, contains records for over 11 million digital objects that are open and freely accessible to users anywhere. When discussing the DPLA as a portal for discovery, we like to emphasize the one-stop shop option or idea. This means that through a single portal, you can access many collections with related content and see connections between that content in new ways. So content from the Smithsonian, next to an example I like to use is the letters of a famous writer that are held by the State Cloud University. And you wouldn't expect to find them there. You wouldn't expect to find that content next to the Smithsonian, but all together in DPLA, you'll find those kinds of connections. So part of our collection goals, and in support of the national platform, is working with partners to ensure that their data is as interoperable as possible. Equalizing data quality happens in collaboration with the data providers, those folks who actually host the data. Thank you. I'm going to zip through here so we can actually get some graphical representation now. Woo! There we go. Thank you. Equalizing data quality happens in collaboration with the data providers, the hubs who are helping them to remediate their data, and then through enrichments at the DPLA point of content access. It means that we can create exciting tools for the discovery of content, and such as the map here, the timeline, and a searchable bookshelf. And all of those are available through the web portal. We're also spotlighting the gems in our partners' collections in educational and curated exhibitions and sets to provide more interactive experiences for users of all type. And we're working with educators and other professionals to establish baseline goals for the development of tools directed at teachers and students. One of the things that I mentioned earlier in a previous presentation is that what we're finding from the educators and the teachers who we're working with is that they want access to three-dimensional objects. They want to be able to point their students at things that people have used or things that people have made, as opposed to just visual representations, photographs, things like that. They want to be able to point them at a physical object, that students really get more out of that thing by seeing it, by understanding that that was used in olden times or whatever it might be. So that's something exciting that we've learned. And that's a place where museums can really play a role. So the DPLA is a platform to build upon. We're fostering the idea of the National Digital Network through our support and promotion of open data through our technical platform. It provides us, as well as our more technically inclined users, with the ability to search, retrieve, and interact with the descriptive data we get from our hubs through a free service called an API, a machine language that enables data sharing. And this is where the linked open data comes into play. We're providing access to our data, the data that we get from our partners, through this API using a language called JSON-LD, and that LD stands for linked data. So this enables us to share our data not just as single records at a time, but suddenly as collections of data or collections as data, so that we can build, or our partners and friends can build tools that, for instance, search 30 million plus items from the DPLA, along with the Digital New Zealand collections and national collections in Australia, Canada, and Europe, and to interact with data in ways that show off collections in innovative ways, like this search by color. And then to enable our collections to appear elsewhere on the web, as here on this World War I focused website hosted by Europeana, which is the European counterpart of DPLA. So you can do a search here on another site and find content from DPLA on World War I. We can only do that because our partners agree to dedicate their metadata to the public domain using a CC0 determination. CC stands for Creative Commons. And generally speaking, the CC0 determination enables creators and owners of copyrighted material to waive all copyright interests and thereby place them completely in the public domain. So our partners are enabling research, reuse, and remixing of their metadata by dedicating it to the public domain. And so in order to participate in DPLA, that's one of the only requirements. So we are also an advocate for the strong public option, for taking an open option whenever it's possible. For most of American history, the ability to access materials for free through public institutions has been central to our culture. So the DPLA works with others to ensure that this critical open intellectual landscape remains vibrant and broad in the face of increasingly restrictive digital options. And the DPLA seeks to multiply openly accessible materials to strengthen the public option that our public institutions represent in their communities. This has often been the library sphere, and I know that this can be interpreted a little differently by museums, but I think it's important that we all understand that this is a role that we all can be playing, and I would submit that we should be playing. So DPLA believes in being a voice for best practices in galleries, libraries, archives, and museums. And we want our partners to join us. This is that national network. We want our partners to join us through the advocacy and implementation so that together we can promote maximal openness and reuse. And I love the Walters Museum. I just saw someone speak from there. They're really doing some amazing things in the open data world, open content world. We foster the idea of a national digital platform through our advocacy for openness and accessibility. Institutions like the Walters Art Museum are great examples of openness. So you go to their site, you click on download, and you get this. Wow. It's pretty amazing. They're not alone. The Getty is very open in their approach to their content as well. So here's a quote from, someone quoted this same article in the last presentation. It was great. It's New Online Openness Lets Museums Share Works with the World from the New York Times, October 27th. But here, we hope people will use our images to enrich their lives, but they're free to make shower curtains or stationery. We don't care. So you can tell that I've moved from talking about metadata to actual digital objects. So as an aggregator of metadata from many institutions, DPLA is in a unique position to help our partners recognize and manage these data quality issues. So this is a metadata record. This is actually a single field in a metadata record. This is a rights statement from one of our partners. And if you're close enough, you can tell who it is, but I didn't hide that. So this is, we have some metadata remediation to work on here as a community. So to this end, DPLA was awarded a Knight News Challenge grant in mid-2014 to support the development of human-friendly and machine-actionable rights statements. With our partners at Europeana and legal scholars from across the US, we are working to create a clear set of statements, a framework for rights statements that can be used by cultural heritage organizations to better communicate the status of the materials in their collections and to open up the possibilities for appropriate sharing. I think that's something that people are comfortable hearing, appropriate sharing of our rich content to the users who want and need them. So this is where you can find the actual rights statements. The white paper is produced. You can look and see what the, I think, 10 different statements that came out of the negotiations, where they are. The full website will be available at the end of this year, rightstatements.org. I think it's an area that we're all thinking about, and it's one that we need to embrace and really start to allow for the interaction and reuse of our content in the digital sphere. Finally, I'll talk about one more project that DPLA is involved in, and this is the one that Trevor mentioned, Hydra in a Box. We feel that this is fostering that same concept of the national digital platform. So this time, it is through community-based repository infrastructure development. The challenge is that there are currently few open systems for sharing our content. Often they are proprietary, standalone systems that don't allow for easy sharing and integration with our instances at other institutions. And I think we all know, can name one or two of those in the museum world. Hydra in a Box aims to make that integration possible to enable greater shareability of our digital content through community-supported development of digital repository tools. We call that Hydra, the tool that will build out Hydra in a Box. So DPLA, Duraspace, and Stanford University are working on the shared objectives. These include providing a modern platform that meets the needs of DPLA hubs and their contributors. Again, think of that 1,600 different partners. There is considerable dissatisfaction among hubs right now, the state of repository and metadata management systems, and I'm guessing that that's possibly shared by one or two of you in the room. In part, we aspire to provide an easier on-ramp for contributing to DPLA and like initiatives with more robust and smoother process. We also aspire to build an extensible platform that can adapt to future needs without Sturm and Drang, and to make the product that can be deployed in many various ways, be it locally or hosted, as a service to the community or as a cloud service. Finally, this project allows us to demonstrate leadership within the Hydra and the digital cultural heritage communities, and will help us further the goal of other related projects, such as the International Image Interoperability Framework, or IIIF, which you may have heard about during the conference so far, and other large-scale aggregators of cultural heritage information. So I think this question cuts to the heart of the concept of the National Digital Platform. I think working together we can accomplish so much more, and I think that's really what DPLA is all about. All right. James is going to open right up.
I think it's really important to have just another quick round of applause for Amy's poise. I mean, if I had to sit there and talk while somebody's pulling up 7 different presentations, I would have been a puddle, so well done. I'm going to, as you hear, we're going to talk about ArtStore's project that's an IMLS-funded grant as part of this platform. This April 28th platform focus discussion that Trevor recapped was really interesting, because I think some of the people there thought it was going to be announcing IMLS's plan to build this platform, to give grants for this platform, like it was a highway and you were going to build on-ramps, you were going to pour concrete. And I think Trevor described it so well. It was such an interesting discussion of what some of us have called it, or people have talked about, as cyber infrastructure. People and practices and existing things to connect. And it's not a matter of building the one Uber thing that we're all going to bow before. So I'm going to talk today a little bit about ArtStore and Shared Shelf, and a little background, our role as a DPLA hub, and then focus really on this museum hub for open content that is grant funded, that is really what we're going forward with. So just, I have to review a little bit about ArtStore, because I always say to people, how many people here know ArtStore? And like everyone raises their hand and no one knows what I'm talking about. So I'm going to give like just a 3-minute version of ArtStore. So ArtStore started almost 14 years ago at the Mellon Foundation with this in mind, is that every college and university was going to scan their cruddy slides. And instead of everybody scanning the same cruddy slide over and over again, we thought, well, we could scan somebody's cruddy slides for them, but then we could also get better images. So if 14 years ago, slide libraries had this, now 14 years later, we have this from Scala. And so first of all, thank you to the many people and the institutions in the room that have contributed content to make ArtStore an aggregation of useful content of museums, archives, photographers, individual scholars as photographers, that now gets their content in the hands of teachers and scholars around the world. We do deal with rights protected work. So like many of you, we work with ARS or VAGA, but we also work with estates like the Matisse Foundation. And so what we try to do is just try to play a bit of a hub role, even before we were calling them hubs, between those who take care of works and care about the care for these objects and document these objects and do the hard work of cataloging them and dealing with rights issues, and bringing them together as one non-exclusive channel to get that content to teachers and scholars and students in colleges and universities and schools. Primary source material is endless, so it's not all just about works. So we're very lucky to have some installation archives. This one's from MoMA. We have more coming in all the time. So again, for scholars and teachers and curators and educators, having the history of installations as they went up is, fascinating in a different way than just documentation of works. It doesn't all come from museums. There are scholars who've been building their own collections around the world for their entire career. So anyway, because it's primary source material, even with all the aggregating and mapping and cross-searching that we do with 2 million images now in the ArtStore Digital Library, we never have enough. So about 5 or 6 years ago, 5 years ago, we started working on a cataloging and asset management cloud-based software called Shared Shelf. And it didn't grow on the collection management side that you all know and live with. It really grew on the university side where again, users of ArtStore were saying, we like your stuff and it's good and there's more all the time, but we have our own stuff. We have our own collections in visual resources, in special collections, our own photography. Can we have ways of mixing our stuff with your stuff? So that was the origins of Shared Shelf. This is a nice graphic, but for most of you it doesn't really say anything, but it's really cataloging tools, it's asset management. But then what became clear was that we needed to be able to enable users to take this content that they were managing in Shared Shelf and do different things with it. It wasn't a one-size-fits-all, here's your stuff, you can do the same thing with everything. So so Shared Shelf is used by institutions for very private collections. This is my dig, and no, I don't want to share my images and my dig with anyone until I've published my work. So they're private collections. They're collections that are shared with the whole campus, like visual resource collections. There are collections that are shared across campuses. So if you're the California Digital Library, you might have image collections that you share across all 10 university campuses. There are other collections that started special collections, like the University of Miami had a Cuban cultural heritage collection that they were hosting in Shared Shelf, and they said, why don't we put this in ArtStore, because it's a special collection. So they contribute collections to ArtStore. And then there are collections that can and should be made open to the world. So there are tools to use Shared Shelf to publish collections to an Omeka site or to Shared Shelf Commons. And so our view is that this is not the ArtStore Digital Library where it's content that we're gathering and sharing. This is a cloud-based software for campuses to do whatever they want with their content. So I can show you shots of it. It's cataloging tools. It has the Getty authorities built in, which is nice, so that hopefully people can catalog better, all that stuff. And this becomes relevant. So this is the output of a collection managed in Shared Shelf. It's from Bryn Mawr College, and it's been published to an Omeka site that then they can make look however they want. So, hey, there's Sharon. Hi, Sharon. And we've worked thanks to our colleagues who built Omeka and work with us to make it work smoothly together. So this is like, it's your stuff. You should be able to do different things with it. So in the time leading up to the creation of Dpla, my colleagues and I attended some of the meetings and thinking about participating in the outreach of what Dpla should be. And at the beginning, we had been meeting with a group of our museum colleagues, just sounding out the different things we did. And we had Amy's colleague, Emily Gore, like the week after she was hired to be director of collections, come to a museum technology advisory committee of ArtStore. And people around the table said, people from the Walters and from Dallas and from Indianapolis said, this is great. We should put collections in this Digital Public Library of America. We should put metadata to lead to our collections. And so ArtStore, being in the middle of the middle of these worlds role, said, let's try to do that. So we were able to be in the first launch of the Dpla. But again, it wasn't we, it was these great institutions who said, we've got public domain stuff that we want to make widely available. And so this made this nice because it makes it look like a really organized process. They were in boxes. Instead, we had people basically in the back room going like this. We had DBAs taking stuff that museums had already contributed, and we were like mapping it here and putting it up there, and that didn't land in the right place, and everything like that. And you've all done that. But the result was that when you go to Dpla from its launch, you could go. This is a search for, I guess it's a search for Paul in Indianapolis. So it's found an artist from whose work. Go back. So let me go again. But what we did is, so we took stuff from these 6 museums, and we generated landing pages. So that search result in Dpla leads you to this landing page. It's called Open ArtStore because it's the open part of ArtStore. And this, you click this, and it launches a big image viewer. You click this, it goes back to the IMA site. Here's the metadata. Here's one of the 87,000 right statements that you have in Dpla. But this is the work of being a hub, of connecting the person searching with the underlying asset. So we've been doing this, and we've been doing it sort of, as I say, in that sort of Scotch tape way. And as Trevor and his colleagues form this agenda for this national digital platform, we got a grant along with 4 museums to figure out how to make this scalable. And so now that's all the blah, blah, blah. And I got 3 minutes. And what I want to do is really get you to think hard and critically about the things I'm about to show you. So in the history of the last 10, 12 years of art store aggregating of museum content, here are the lessons we learned. We started off admiring all the work that Amico had done, and Amico had gotten many of you to work together for the first time really well in aggregating digital collections, and you all worked really hard to hit a target. You got your stuff out of your system, you mapped it to a target, it was a lot of work, you were tired, it worked great, but it was limited by how much work you all could do to map to hit that target. Art Store came along, we said, ooh, that was hard, let's make it easy. We'll do all the work. So you all have sent us data, and we said, send us whatever you got. Send us a comma delimited file, we'll map it, and we'll make it work. And you all said, okay. So you sent us stuff, and it was limited by how much work we could do. And as we got this grant, and we see the reach of Dpla wanting to get to museums all over the country in a different sort of strata than the hubs that are state hubs or huge institutions like the Smithsonian or NYPL, we wanted to get to a point where we can use this shared shelf platform and help to gather stuff in a way that is really doable. So the questions are sort of clear. Do you get people to map their data before they put it in this system? So if I go to any of you and say, oh, in your spare time, do you mind mapping your data and putting it in this other system that isn't your DAM and it isn't your collections management, it's not your website, and you want to do this good thing of getting there, but do you want to do that? And you say, So the other alternative, which is what I'm going to show 3 slides of here in no particular order, is to get you to put your content in shared shelf. Shared shelf doesn't have one data model. You can put it in. And these are so all of you who have extra XML program people are ready to write a script. Put your head down and rest, because I'm not talking to you. I'm talking to everyone else, especially smaller museums that want to participate in something like this but don't have extra programmers sitting around. So the question is, you get your stuff out, you get it out in 20 fields or 28 fields or 8 fields or however many you want to export in Excel, and you can load it into shared shelf. We have tools for loading stuff into shared shelf. And you put it in there with whatever data, whatever fields you have. And then instead of mapping beforehand and doing the work, you have stuff in there. You have public domain stuff, you have rights constraint stuff, everything like that. And then what we're going to do, and I'm going to take 30 seconds more, is we already have tools. Remember the Omeka site I showed you before? That was made because somebody put their stuff in shared shelf and mapped to Omeka. And there we have mapping tools. So this says, here are my publishing targets. Do I want to publish it to the Art Store workspace, shared shelf commons, or to an Omeka publishing target? So we have mapping tools where we give you the fields. And you take the target fields, and you have a prefix if you want it. Is it displayable? Is it searchable? Is it required? And so we'll make one of these for Dpla. And then instead of us sitting here trying to help 7 museums get their stuff in the Dpla, the goal would be that then 500 places could put their stuff in, do that mapping themselves, and publish it. Now they'll have to put in a logo, and they'll have to agree to your CC0 terms, and all that stuff has to be in there, but it's supposed to be no hands. So that, I would love you to digest that, see if it's crazy, and then either ask questions or talk to me after the session. Thank you.
Because you have the magic touch.
I don't know the magic. I have the magic touch. It takes 8 minutes to launch a presentation.
Thank you. Wow. Okay. Do you have to put that down a little bit? Hey, good afternoon. My name is Sandra Narva. I'm a senior program officer in the Office of Museum Services at IMLS. So I will be talking all about the museum side of the house. And so we do, and we can, help fund everything that you were talking about with the National Digital Platform. And we have been for years, in fact. We just don't use the same language, even though we're within the same organization. We do not have a specific funding stream for digital projects, but it is integrated into all of our programs over in the Office of Museum Services. So I know it's the end of the day and people are getting a little bit tired, but a little bit of audience participation here. So how many of you have applied for museum funds for IMLS? Oh, good. So we have a good mixed crowd. So those who have been funded and those who haven't. So I'm sorry for those folks who have received money. This might be a little bit boring, but a little bit of a refresher. So we have a few programs over in the Office of Museum Services. And in a way, they do kind of reflect what's over on the library side, but we have a twist with some of our other programs. So I'd first like to talk about the National Leadership Grants, and this is kind of like the big daddy of them all over in the Office of Museum Services. I should mention that all of our grant programs have a deadline of December 1st. So there's still a little bit of time if you are sitting here today and you think about a great project or program that you'd like to receive funding for, that you can start writing tonight, maybe, so that you could get it in by the December 1st deadline, or I certainly hope that you have things in the pipeline and you're working on it. But the National Leadership Grant Program is, it's really all about the museum field. These are the types of projects that, as I like to say, they really are reinventing the wheel, and you are coming up with something that is, that will help forward the museum profession. So something that will affect multiple institutions, affect the entire field, or be something else that people can pick up and really start using or kind of start, partnering with. And these tend to be not single institutions embarking on these types of projects, but they tend to be very collaborative because they are larger and they make more of an impact in the field. It also comes with a higher dollar amount. These awards do go up to $500,000, unlike the $2 million awards that are given over on the library side. But we unfortunately have to spread it around a little bit more. So that's making excuses, but that's what we do. And there are different cost sharing requirements. It's a one-to-one cost share. You need one non-federal dollar for every federal dollar that you receive. Unless it's a research project, and those are very, very specific research that you would need to do in order not to have that cost share requirement. And these can be up to 1 to 3 year projects. It can be from museums, it can be from nonprofit organizations that are associated with museums, or also different types of service organizations for institutions. And so we have funded quite a few projects that have really worked with the National Digital Platform. And of course, little did we know you'd be standing in the back of the room. We keep funding Mecca. And in fiscal year 2014, we funded a great project that will help make it a little bit more nimble on different types of platforms. And we continue to assist with these great efforts that, as you have heard, have really linked multiple institutions in helping get their information out there. As well as a project that we funded this past fiscal year that was led by the Crystal Bridges Museum of Art to work with the American Art Collaborative, which is a collaboration of 14 museums and getting their collections online and linking their collections, rather. But the neat thing about this is it wasn't only to do that, but it was also to assist with training of people within those organizations to make this possible. And I think that's something that's often overlooked, that we do try to go and facilitate training so that we can make that possible. And I know that that was also listed too in the report that you had that came out of it. It's great to do it, but what if people don't know how? And so it's really trying to make the funds available to assist the profession as a whole. And now going on to the Museums for America. Museums for America is the largest, actually it's the largest pot of federal money for museums, earmarked specifically for funding for museums. And this program is, unlike the National Leadership Grant Program, which is all about the field, MFA, we use different terms. Instead of Museums for America, it's MFA, is really all about your own organization. So it's somewhat greedy. We do provide, we ask you to go and provide a summary of your strategic plan, and we ask that the project go and tie in with one of the high-level goals of your strategic plan. And so it's really all about your institution and assisting your institution in meeting those goals to better serve your public, whoever the public is that you define. And so once again, these awards are, our deadline is December 1st for projects that are 1 to 3 years in length. We have 2 different tiers of funding for this this program. It goes up to $150,000. But we're trying also to reach out to smaller institutions, and if you request up to $25,000, there are no cost-sharing requirements. Larger institutions can also apply to that. Actually, I had an awardee this past year. They were doing some planning for a larger project, and that's all they needed was an infusion of money to do that. But if you have anything from $25,001 up, you need a one-to-one cost share. And I should mention, unfortunately, I neglected to mention this with National Leadership Grants as well. We do have 3 different categories of funding within each of these programs, and they're learning experiences, which is really all about educational projects and programs and exhibitions, kind of getting out there to your constituents, as well as community anchors projects. Community anchors projects are those that bubble up from the community. The community is coming to you with the need, and you are meeting them to do that. So it may be a social ill that is trying to be corrected, or just working with your community in a collaborative way, in a very different way, is something that we're trying to go and nurture. As well as collection stewardship. And that's about, gaining intellectual control over your collections, cataloging your collections, digitizing your collections, in addition to even doing some conservation or maybe rehousing. So it's all care of those collections. And so in coming up with some great examples from Museums for America that we have funded over the past few years, we have funded some digitization projects, which that's something that you will not receive funding for within the Office of Library Services, but you will get it from the Office of Museum Services. And so we have assisted with these larger efforts, and you'll see that both the Museum of Fine Arts Houston and also Princeton, both of them were working to digitize their collections so that they could work with ArtStore. And so it's really, once again, IMLS money facilitating the use of these larger platforms. And so we certainly encourage it. And if you need assistance in doing that, you can come to the program from Museums for America to do that. And then another project, this is a little bit different, with Harvard, was in 2014, and they were partnering with both the Encyclopedia of Life and also the Biodiversity Heritage Library to come up with some very detailed stories for them to use, and that has been an extremely successful project to date. So these are some of the things to think about rather than just doing, we want to have, people think of Museums for America, if you're familiar with it, it's like, we have an exhibition, we want to do some interactives or something of that sort. You can definitely go and fund projects like this as well. They're just not as large as National Leadership Grants, but once again, it's about your institution, not about the field. And the last program that I want to discuss a little bit about is Sparks. There is a Sparks program over in the library side, Sparks in the museum side, and Sparks, of course, are for museums. The deadline is December 1st this year, and it is for one-year projects that are up to $25,000. This is a little bit of a subset. It sounds like a little offshoot of the National Leadership Grant Program. So once again, it's something that is affecting the museum field as a whole, but you want to try something risky. And you just need a small infusion of money to go and take that risk, to do something. We want you to go and prototype something. We want you to try something that you've never done, that people in the field haven't done before. But this is something that will go, and once again, not just assist you, your own institution, but assist the community as a whole. So I like to put it, we look for sparky projects. And if there's something, if in doubt, call us at IMLS to go and make sure that your project isn't a Museums for America project and it would be a Sparks project, because unfortunately the majority of the applications we received to this program really should be to Museums for America. So just something to think about, making sure you're applying for the right category. And here is a really great example from this past year in Tulane. And what they're doing is we're helping them with their work in 3D imaging of all these great collections they have. They have lots of specimens, fish specimens in bottles. And so they're doing 3D scanning of that. And that, of course, will definitely go and assist the field. So a bunch of statistics you probably really don't need to see, but you can see how competitive the program is. We do receive quite a few applications into Museums for America. And in reality, we only have about $20 million to award. So we did make 202 awards the previous year. And national leadership grants, it's about a 20% success rate on those. And we only have just shy of $6 million for all American museums for national leadership grants. And for Sparks, you can see that only 6 were awarded this past year. And that was a 15% success rate. But once again, many of those applications should have been Museums for America. So if you're interested in that program, please call us and we can help you determine what you should apply for. Now, this is my contact information. I'm more than happy to talk to you about any Office of Museum Services projects. And I know we can talk all about library programs, but hopefully we have a few minutes for questions, and I will open the floor up for that. Or would you like to say anything in closing?
No, I think question time.
Question time.
It's question time. So yeah, we're happy to answer questions about the IMLS programs, and obviously we also have folks working on projects who can answer the questions about their projects. Yes.
I have kind of a question about the Dpla pipeline. In particular, I'm wondering, we actually have library archiving and museum collections, and we're in the process of working out a way to go bring that content over to a hub that we can get into Dpla. And my question is, are there differences in the way you're expecting to get the data for these different types of content? If we can map things into the same field and send it over in one big chunk, is that good? Or do you expect the DB stuff should look different?
No, you're going to want to map your data to whatever the standard is that your hub uses. So what's going to happen is your data is probably going to look very similar, even though it's coming from those different parts of your institution. Everything's going to have a title, a date. Well, everything's going to have a title. And then everything's going to have a rights statement, because that's required. And beyond that, hopefully there'll be more bibliographic information available for those records. But we're not going to get scope content notes from archives materials, and we probably won't get, some of the curatorial notes that are in the museum records, but sort of basic, solid metadata records for all of them.
Well, in that case too, I mean, it is, I think, prompts another question, which is for folks who are thinking about getting involved with you guys, and they might, if they do have a bunch of different kinds of collections, it probably makes more sense to go through a regional hub than it would. But where if they are really focused, if they are a very clear fit for either BHL is a hub that does biodiversity heritage stuff, or Art Store if that's really sort of their universe. Does that make sense? Like if you're all kinds of stuff, it probably makes more sense to be trying to get into through a state hub that's going to have to represent all kinds of stuff. Where if you're very purposely focused in a special area, then someone who's developing tools and services around that special area might be more attuned to it.
Yep, that makes sense. That makes sense.
Yep.
So this question is about it's about IMLS, but could be applied, I guess, to because I am sorry, not IMLS, but Dpla. I'm sorry.
No worries, it's pretty late in the day.
Because the long term, like Dpla in the long term does use up resources like the hubs have to expend resources to keep up the work. What is being done to assure that that these hubs persist and they don't just stop functioning and you lose all of that wonderful content?
Yeah, so that's a tough question, especially because we have folks on the ground who are really doing this because they believe in it. There are states where they're getting funding from they're getting LSTA funding, which is Library Services and Technology Act funding that comes from IMLS, but comes through the state library and then is distributed there. So some of them are getting extra funding. They have institutional support at many of them, so it's not that they're going to go away anytime soon. But there is definitely a belief in what we're doing as a community. And so if for some reason a hub stopped participating, that would be very sad. But we would continue to host the content that they had already provided as long as they're comfortable with that. So the content itself would go away. I think the biggest, the thing that would be the most disappointing would be that the services that they're providing at the local level might go away as well. Because, you know, one of the things that we really talk about are these services, the professional development and the metadata remediation and creation and digitization services and hosting services, that those are really helping to build capacity for all of these participants, all of these institutional participants. And the idea that that might go away is really unfortunate. But I think that we're building models that are pretty sustainable, that we're not just going to a single institution and saying, you be the hub, but what we're doing is finding collaborations in a state and that are enabling this partnership where one institution maybe takes on the technology piece and another institution takes on the outreach piece, and so together they're stronger and able to build something more sustainable.
I think something else I'd throw in on that too, that's because it's a generic question that works for any of these sort of national efforts, is, and I think one of the things that I mentioned earlier that I'd try to stress with this too is that the success of these things is all going to be the extent to which they actually do serve local needs, because quite frankly, that's where the resources for libraries and museums exist in the country. You know, the public libraries, for instance, is $10 billion a year is spent on public libraries, but that's because they're incredibly responsive to the needs of local communities. And so in that vein, the more these big national projects can clearly serve the missions of the organizations in their own communities, the extent to which that buy-in will continue to be there. But I think that's also a huge opportunity, which is that these kinds of projects can ideally sort of create amplify the audience of the local work and provide even more better arguments for those folks to make when they are talking to stakeholders in their community to say, look, we're part of this and we've got this. You know, those sorts of things are, I think, part of ideally what the most successful projects are going to be throughout this. So that it is actually a value. It should always be a value added to the local organization, the region, at every level. There was another question.
I work at a museum. We've contributed content to ArtStore, and I'm pretty sure we contributed at a level which it was as most open access as possible. In that respect, would it automatically be added to shared shelf, or is that something we need to communicate to ArtStore to make the?
So we should communicate again, because in the interest of building ArtStore, we were always sort of making sure that what we were agreeing to together was clear. So because it was a time early on, particularly, where museums were anxious about putting content in aggregation like this. So the terms and conditions under which we got content from any institution were sort of very distinctly outlined. So even if they were liberal within those boundaries, they weren't going to be allowing us to pass it along to anyone else, and so we won't do that. So, but revisiting those so that as these channels open up would be great. So, come find me.
Great. Any last questions? Because I think we're technically over by a couple minutes. When I didn't mention our grant deadline, so we'll have calls for 2-page preliminary proposals for the National Leadership Grants Program in the library side and the 21st Century Librarian Program in February. So stay tuned for those if your organization has a library, because we give grants to libraries. But huge thanks for everyone for joining us. I hope this was useful. I think all of us are on Twitter and emails, and you got our contact info, so we're happy to chat with. These are big tent efforts, and we're excited to work more with everybody.
Thank you.